So we congratulate him and send him all our love. But Gary Gas, he's going to be here presenting, are the two brothers that brought us the picture of ourselves in Los Nobles. They created one of the funniest and biggest box office hits. They were able to put their marketing and publicity powerhouse behind their creation to spread it all over. Please welcome Gas Alazraki.
Thank you for having me here. It's great to be here and see how much the school has grown. So I'm going to tell you the story of how Nosotros los Nobles changed a lot of the Mexican film industry. But what I really hope you guys take away from this is the thought process of how I was looking at everything as I made Nosotros los Nobles. So, we'll talk about some good films, because we're talking about films, so I'll take you thematically through the different phases of the story. So once upon a time in Mexico, we used to have a golden era of cinema, where we had great films. People used to love our cinema. The movie theaters were packed, and there was a real business going on here. Our cinema was being exported, everyone really liked it. But then, we had a different change. Government incentives froze the price of the ticket, and they kept on giving subsidies to producers to make their films, so it didn't really matter if the film sold. The government would give them the money, they would spend about 30% of that on making a movie, if they made the movie, or they just kept the money. And the movie theaters would not be able to make their money back because the ticket price was frozen. So we had our dark ages where basically Organización Ramirez was the only movie theater company that was still alive, and they were showing American films, and the films that were being made were fichera films and narco films, and no real cultural value was being brought back here. So, by 1995, we had 1,900 screens. Cinemex was coming in to up the competition because the government took out the freeze point on the ticket. And just to give you some context for the rest of the chat, this is what business used to look like back in 1995. With 118 prints, Romeo and Juliet made 19 million pesos. I mean, yeah, pesos, dollars? No, pesos. 305 prints in the ID4 made, no, you just read them. Right? So there's a ratio between prints and 30 million pesos. So get familiarized with this. And meanwhile, our industry, this is what we were looking at. 20 prints, 30 prints, 12 prints, 23 prints. They weren't even making 1 million pesos in sales. And I wonder, do you guys recognize these titles? No. Well, that's funny because they were Mexican Academy Award winners. So, we had a new renaissance when Cinemex came in, because now the movie theater experience was closer to what we could see in the US, and the experience was much better. And that allowed Sexo, Pudor, Lágrimas in 1991 to come in here, put on a good business, and then one after the other, we were having great films. Look at how many prints they were doing, and they were doing great businesses. And 3 years in a row, we had Mexican directors being nominated for the Academy Awards. So it felt like we were coming really out of the funk. The government created this tax incentive, which allowed you to put 10% of your taxes into any film. And in 2006, and that detonated a new era of filmmaking. But it didn't really solve everything, and what I would hear once that the incentive was in place was that audiences didn't like to see films in Spanish. They've been seeing films in English for such a long time that now when they see a film in English, it doesn't feel quite right. So You know, these movies were $2 million, which are the equivalent for a $20 million film, and they tanked. So they would say that it's hard to see an action film in Spanish with Bárbara Mori, a thriller. You don't buy it, you know? You don't buy a sci-fi film of La Última Muerte because sci-fi in Spanish is weird. I mean, it just doesn't work. And a drama, Así del Precipicio, it's terrible. And they were just like giving these weird excuses. Then the second thing is that they would say is that the movie theaters, if the Mexican movie theaters don't want Mexican business because they don't want to have an empty, they don't support Mexican cinema by putting it on the good salas. They put it on the last one next to the toilet, and if your movie doesn't perform well, they take it out. And even if they announce it, they say that the projector is down. So there's like this big conspiracy theory that they don't support Mexican cinema. And here's the proof, right? I mean, 50 prints, 70 prints, these are all nominated in the last 2 years for the Ariel, and look at the business, it wasn't good, right? It wasn't all bad. We had, with the tax incentive, certain hits, like Kilómetro 31, and all of these films in 2007, 2008, you know, we had it was a great year. Rudo y Cursi and Arráncame la Vida, and then our movie industry was working, but these were very little success stories, and compared to what was happening that same year, X-Men, we made 118 million with our best film. They made 184 million. Transformers, 195. So now you move on to this one, and instead of 97 million to 158 million, 205 million, and Thor, 229 million. So the basic assumption was that you cannot compete against Hollywood. They have more money in their ad campaign. They have a longer running history with the Mexican audience, so you cannot really compete with them, right? So with all these points in place, the obvious conclusion is that Mexican cinema cannot evolve back into a business because there's a cap. You will not be able to go past the miracle of the crime of Father Amaro because you had the church forbidding people from going into the movie theaters, and that created so much curiosity that everyone wanted to go and see it. And that phenomenon will never happen again. So the last numbers you saw, that's as good as it gets, right? So my strategy was to go back to the typical gringo mentality. I said, let's do Hollywood films in Spanish, right? While I was here at the American school, we all used to quote films that were popular, and we used to quote the lines, and there was a great amount of US films that spoke to us and that we adopted, and I wanted my films to be like that. So the first thing I decided was that I would do classic screenplay structure, the Greeks. Comedy or drama, go with the 3 acts, you know, the setup, the confrontation, the resolution, and really, really, really spend 2 years trying to get that down in the script. The second thing was that I kept on thinking about these films. You know, all of these films were breakthrough films for these guys. And you didn't know who they were, but they were great. And you didn't need to live in LA to like Clueless, and people all over the world started to go, whatever, loser. And I was like, well, why can't I do that here in Mexico, you know? So you look at these, and when you compare these posters to the ones that I showed you before from our industry, you want to see these films, right? I mean, it's a good and clear ad campaign. When you see the 40-year-old virgin, his legs are like in a V, you know, the longer, it says, the longer you wait, the harder it gets. You know, they're playing with the double entendre from the get-go. You know, they're really engaging you from the start. So I said, if I can follow these things, I should get similar results. So with Warner Brothers, we spoke about doing multiple posters, which is something that not many companies did. Every time you had contact with our poster, I wanted you to laugh, and I wanted you to get a sense that it was about family, wealth, and poverty all thrown in together. A mischievous look from the father. Our tagline is, a falta de plata sale el cobre. Bárbara says, soy tipo tú, pero bien. Amor y paz con cargo a mi tarjeta de crédito. So we were playing, we wanted you to laugh every time that you would see something with the film, and then we went crazy. We started to do more material, more advertising material, so that it felt like something big was happening. That's how we wanted to generate a perception that this was not your typical Mexican film. So, what happened? The impact that we had, we did not expect. I did think that the miracle of Father Amaro, you needed the church saying, don't see Los Nobles. But, what did we discover? The first myth, that movie theaters boycotted Mexican cinema, not true. Cinépolis had us doing commercials for them with our characters, saying 3,000 screens, and then come to the Forex commercials. And they would, we started with 650 screens, and they opened it up to 850 screens on their own. They kept on pushing. Guaranteed success, a guaranteed good time if you see the film. So we had support. Once again, that myth that Mexican theaters boycotted cinema, not true. Because there's a difference between commercial cinema and art house cinema. And it makes more sense to me to know that indie cinema has always had it hard. They cannot get into commercial movie theaters because people go to the commercial movie theater for a commercial experience. What we need are more art house theaters so that people can go there. I mean, Club Sandwich is no small deal. MK won Best Director in San Sebastián this year, you know? But look at the poster. You don't really get a sense of what the movie is about. You don't recognize any of the people. There's nothing really that appealing or marketing-wise as with Los Nobles, which is really commercial versus art house. And this makes more sense, you know? This is real. Art house has it hard finding an audience. Myth, audiences didn't like to see films in Spanish. Not true. We started a relationship with an untapped audience. You know, they started making memes. The guys started to dress like the character and putting it in their Facebook profiles. They dress like my characters for parties. Journalists started to create mock templates of corrupt politicians saying, ellos los nobles. They made cartoons. This is all fan-generated. This isn't us. You know, there's a guy that opened an account saying Javi Noble, and he runs it. You know, and he has like 700,000 followers, you know? So it wasn't true, and I always thought that it wasn't true. And that thing about you can't compete against Hollywood, well, we were opening against these films in Semana Santa, and Warner Brothers had the idea of doing a pre-release, a small release that would get the word of mouth going, so that we would open against G.I. Joe on Jueves Santo. They would be with 900 screens. This is insane. I mean, 1,000 screens for a movie in English, in Spanish, 3D, 2D. You cannot compete. But we ended up being first place in our week 4. Look, we were next to Oblivion. He was in second place. By our week 6, we were still in second place. He was already in 6th, right? We ended up doing 339 million pesos in sales with only 650 screens. We became number 18 in history of all the films that have ever been in Mexico. I was first place until Eugenio Derbez kicked the shit out of me. And I think he is now in 4th. So to put things in perspective, we beat 12 out of 14 Pixar films. We beat all 4 of the Lord of the Rings films, 2 out of the 3 Spider-Man films, 7 out of the 8 Harry Potter films, 2 out of 3 Batman films, we beat Superman. Misión Imposible, all of them, we did better. All better than all of the Pirates of the Caribbean, better than 2 out of 3 Iron Mans, better than 5 out of 6 Fast and the Furious. And now people are going with our formula. The distributors now believe in Mexican cinema, and they are coming up with 1,500 screens, 1,000 prints, 870 prints, 97 million pesos on her second weekend. It's insane. That's what Arráncame la Vida did in the entire run. And we still don't know what Cácaro Gumaro is going to do, but Fox is coming out with 1,200 screens. This is a before and after. So we changed the paradigms. It was accidental. We didn't think that something this big was going to happen, but it happened. And now what we're doing is that we want to spread the knowledge, right? So we are putting a screenwriting seminar. We are doing a gala for the Arieles, because right now nobody really connects with the Academy. We want to make a big party that will bring people together in a big party for Los Arieles and try to get glamour back into the mix. And we are doing an alliance with Fox International Pictures and Videocine, where we are throwing out new directors into the stardom. So, plus a fund for film investment and conference tours, we think that Mexican cinema can be a business now. So to sum it up, it was once a business, then it wasn't. We followed the Hollywood formula, and it changed all the paradigms, and now Mexican cinema can be a business. So that is how Nosotros los Nobles changed the Mexican film industry.